It's widely reported now Nick Saban retiring as the head coach at Alabama. Pretty amazing statement that just came out of my mouth there. But this was going to happen. It was only a matter of time, and the time has gotten here. And I think it's, a lot of congratulations sent to Nick and everything he's done at Alabama. He's the greatest coach of all time in college football history. All due respect to Bear Bryant, who was exceptional himself, but not Nick Saban. And Nick did it at a time when it was extremely competitive in the SEC. Extremely competitive. You had teams like Georgia, Florida, LSU winning national championships. That was the case when Bear was at Alabama, but not this condensed, not this heavy of a time. And Auburn, I left Auburn out of that time too. So it's really been a heck of a run for Nick. So what does this mean for everybody else in the league? What does it mean for the Southeastern Conference? What does it mean for Georgia? What does it mean for Alabama? I'm going to cover all of that right now. I think there's a lot to remember here. First of all, Nick came to Alabama after, Mike Shula's run with the Tide, where he was 5-7 in his final season. He went, he did not have a successful run at Alabama. The guy before him, Dennis Franchione, had one 10-win season. The guy before him, Mike DeBose, had one 10-win season, won the conference. The guy before him was pretty good. Gene Stallings won the national championship in 1992. That was his only SEC championship. So Alabama and the guy before him, Bill Curry, you may or may not remember that. He won one SEC championship and they ran him out the door. Now he tied that SEC championship. The guy before that, Ray Perkins, I think there's a lot of only remembering Nick at Alabama. And I remember very well, because I covered the SEC during that time, what it was like at Alabama pre-Nick. Now, it may be that Alabama keeps this going. I'm skeptical that that's the case, because even with Nick, things have slowed tremendously compared to the most previous run of Nick's time, which was, really the glory days from 09, I would say to 17, but if you want to include 2020 in there, you can. But there's no question that Georgia's passed Alabama as the best program in the league. This is not going to help that part for Alabama. And for all the Alabama folks on here, this is not trying to trigger y'all, so please don't be triggered by it, okay? But clearly now, there's no question who the best coach in college football is, and that's Kirby. It may be that Jim Harbaugh's not even a coach by the time you're watching this. So there's just no telling with Michigan. But I think for Bama, it was such a mess when Mike DeBose was fired. You bring in Mike Price. That was a train wreck. And then Dennis Franchione, Mike Shula, and just got it wrong time after time after time. I mean, Gene Stallings was a very good head coach at Alabama. Won the national championship in '92, but y'all, they were 11-1 the year before that. They were 12-1 in '94. This is a really good program. And then he retired after the '96 season with that march down the field to beat Michigan in the Outback Bowl in '97. That was like a legendary moment at Alabama. Well, that was before they ripped off national title after national title under Nick Saban. Now, I don't think they're going to collapse, but it's not going to be like it's been at all. And frankly, by the way, this is a legendary moment in Georgia-Bama history. Kirby got his national championship with Nick there. Well, got one of them. The other, he did not, Nick wasn't there to play him. This is a Kelee Ringo sign. This is very rare. This is a Kelee Ringo sign DAWGSTRUCTION. You can only get this here. The link is down below. Make sure you're checking that out. This is a limited edition, so we don't have a lot of these left. Forward by our buddy Jeff Foxworthy. Nothing great happens after a legendary coach leaves. You look at Florida, it took them 5 years basically to get back to where they wanted to be with Urban Meyer. And then Urban left, and it's been, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's been a disaster since at Florida. When Bear Bryant left, it took Alabama 12 years to win a national championship again. And, they were pretty good during some of those times. but they didn't win the national championship. In 80, they were 10-2, 9-2, and then 10-3 in 86, 10-2 in 89. But other than that, there were some 5-6s, there were some 8-4s, there were a lot of 8-4s kind of mixed in there. And then from the time that Gene left until Nick got there, it was thin pickings. I mean, Alabama was not Alabama was Alabama in name only. When you think about Miami, same situation down there. I mean, when you lost Butch, they win the national championship, but it fell apart after that. You lose Jimmy Johnson, all those guys. You lose these legendary coaches. Dennis Erickson won it after that, but is Alabama in that position? Is Alabama like that now? Who's going to want to go there after the fact? Pete Carroll, SC. How'd that turn out? Not great. Not great at all. SC has not played for a national championship since that 2005 season. Vince Dooley, after Vince, it was thin for a while. I would say it took until Mark Richt got there for Georgia to be back on the national map. Vince retired in 88. Mark didn't win the league until 2002. That's a long time. That's a decade. It wasn't a decade lost. And again, Alabama didn't lose decades, but they weren't playing for national championships. From 1992 until 2009, Alabama didn't play for the national championship, y'all. They won one SEC championship. That's it. And they lost some really competitive SEC championships, but they didn't. So Mac Brown at Texas, not great after Mac Brown, right? I mean, they played for the national championship in 2009, I think it was, and then they didn't play for. They still have not played for a national championship since then. So things can go away. And that's just all there is to it. I have a lot of connections with Clemson people. I'm sure they're nervous. I don't think there's anything to be nervous about because I don't think Dabo is going to get the job at Alabama. I think if this were 5 years ago, maybe a different conversation. But the guy's a 9-4 coach right now, and that's just not going to get it done. So I think for Georgia, the fact of the matter is that this is an important moment. There's been a lot of important moments for the Dogs in all of this. The one program that's been in their way has not been Tennessee. It's not been the Jackets. It's not been Auburn. It's not been the Gators. It's been Alabama. When you think about, how many national championships Georgia could have won without Alabama in the way, it's been a few more. I mean, this year notwithstanding, I will count that. So 23, 17 for sure, and 2012. I mean, 17 clearly. I think clearly 2012, quite frankly. This year, maybe not as clear, but maybe. So, all those Alabama teams had Nick as their head coach. When Georgia was, beating Alabama in 2002 at Bryant-Denny and then kind of throttling them in Athens the next year, Nick wasn't the head coach. He was at LSU. He was LSU beating Georgia. So, I don't think it's appropriate to say ding dong, the witch is dead. I mean, Nick Saban changed college football, period. And that's just all there is to it. If you can't, there's always been too much dislike, whatever you want to call it, aimed towards Nick from corners of the SEC, whether it's Georgia or Auburn or whoever it needed to be. And we talked about this a lot at Dawg Post. There needed to be, and there should be, and certainly there should be now, appreciation for what he has done and what he did at Alabama and in the league. I mean, he didn't just win a national championship at Alabama. So, but this is a pivot point. I mean, the team that just won 2 of the last 3 national championships just got the biggest obstacle in their way out of their way. What do I mean by that? Well, and I'll check it again right now. Heading into the 24 season, we all know Georgia's going to play at Alabama. Well, what's the line for that game? Well, earlier today, Georgia was getting a point, so they were it was Georgia +1 against Alabama. All right. Fast forward to Nick Saban, the news breaking that Nick Saban is no longer the head coach at Alabama. And do you think that would you imagine that the odds would change? Yes, they have. I would say dramatically, actually. It went from Georgia being a 1-point dog to being a 2.5-point favorite. That's a 3-point swing, 3.5-point swing from this news. 3.5 points, half a touchdown. Georgia's favored to win at Alabama. You know how many teams have been favored to win at Alabama with Nick Saban as their head coach? Well, it has not happened since 2008, period. It will probably happen this fall with Georgia specifically. I mean, Georgia is as close to a favorite at Alabama as they are at Ole Miss right now. Think about that. That's where we're at with. That's how much this news matters. The national championship, Bama was the 2 coming into today at plus 550. They're at plus 1,000 now. They went from the 2 spot to the 4 spot. Michigan's not even on here anymore, so somebody knows something we don't about Jim Harbaugh. You know, it matters. You know, Alabama's regular season win over under is now 9.5. We haven't seen that in a long time. Long time. It's been 10 or more. So this has just gotten very complicated for Bama. For Georgia, they let a national championship get away from them this year. Just that's all there is to it. This moment should have happened again this winter. I want to see what the college football playoff looks like. But, you know, from here on out, Georgia should really be winning national championships. It should be something that's not abnormal at all. And I think that, you know, that's the pressure that's on now for Georgia. Kirby specifically is, you know, what is stopping them from winning the national championship? This decade, they've lost 3 games, y'all. 3 games they've lost. The person responsible, they've lost, I misspoke there. They've lost 4 games this decade. The person responsible for 3 of those 4 losses has retired. The other guy isn't in coaching anymore. It's all you need to know. So I don't know that the pressure is higher, but, you know, we've lost something that could have really been a lot of fun, which would be a Georgia-Alabama over these next 5 years. We don't get that anymore. I mean, is it possible that Dan Lanning could come in there and get Alabama to a couple national championships? I mean, it is. Could Lane Kiffin do it? I would think Dan would be more likely to do it, but, you know, could James Franklin do it? Boy, you don't want to hire James Franklin if you're Alabama, okay? That would be a mistake. Mike Norvell, Marcus Freeman. I mean, like, I don't know why Kirby's not being mentioned other than people really feel firmly. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any question that he would. I mean, he's going to stay at Georgia. But I don't know why he's not making any lists. For a long time, he was the heir apparent. But 2 national championships later, his own legacy later, why would you go to Alabama if you're Kirby when you've got, frankly, a better setup at Georgia? You wouldn't, and he's not. So, but I am curious why, you know, the sort of stabbing in the dark that are these coaching lists doesn't include Kirby, but I know why. And then, you know, you see Dabo, that would be 2 things at the same time. First of all, that is very unlikely. And there's a lot of different reasons why. Secondly, it would be fascinating to see that guy at that school in this league, because it would probably not go well. And I think the pressure would be tremendous. I think you need to stay where you're at, where you're comfortable, and where you're, you know, I mean, I don't mean this in a bad way, where going 9-4 is not going to hurt a lot of people's feelings. You go 9-4 at Alabama? No. They're going to run you out of town. You don't think they will? You know, ask Bill Curry what it's like to lose to Auburn. Not going to happen. And the other thing I'll say about Nick is he saved his best for Georgia. He saved his best for Auburn. He saved his best for big moments. And, you know, I did not think I would be on the field to watch his last win, but I was. And, you know, this was his best coaching job, period. It just was. And that game that 1 week stretch was probably the greatest 7 to 8 days that he's had in coaching in terms of performance and just getting it done. They were not better than Georgia, and they beat them. They were in beyond dire straits against Auburn and beat them. And I think that goes to show just how good he has been, all this stuff. But, you know, Alabama, I don't think this will hurt them dramatically in 24. I didn't think they'd win the national championship in 24. I don't think that changes. I mean, it doesn't help with Nick leaving, but you'll see this over time hurt them because, as Matt and I have talked about, Kirby has recruited at a different level than Nick lately, albeit how great that class was the 23 class was for Alabama. That's a great class. Georgia one-upped it in 24. So I think what you'll see is by 26 and maybe even 25, you'll see this is different than it was. And honestly, it has been different than it was. The moving of the so all of college football is a zero-sum game. If you don't know what that means, just go look up zero-sum. But Alabama's loss was Georgia's gain. Georgia's gain was Alabama's loss. And there's no question that over these last 3 years, Georgia has cost Alabama at least one national championship, right? Over these last 3 years, they both cost each other a national championship, from my perspective. Georgia was just way better than them in 15, in 22 with the 15-0 season. But you've steadily seen, Kirby left there after the 15 season. He was there in 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And in that 7 seasons, they won it in 9, 11, 12, and 15. 4 of 7, that's a lot. And from that point forward, of course, the 17 national championship and the 20 national championship. And I don't want to say that's it, but that is all they've won. It's not 2 is not the same as 4. It's just not. It's great. It is great. It's exceptional, actually. But it's not, in that, from 17 to 20, nobody won more national championships than Alabama because they won 2 and everybody else, LSU and Clemson, won 1. But you just go back a year and Clemson won 2. So, but, from the time that Kirby's been at Georgia, there's only been 3 programs that have won 2 national championships or more: Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia. One of those is not like the other 2, right? I don't think. So we're going to see what happens now and what I mean by that is Clemson's not the same as Bama and Georgia. Now we're going to see if Alabama regresses. And the answer is they are certainly going to regress. The question is how much. The next coach that's at Alabama can completely win the national championship. Totally. The next coach at Alabama is not winning 6 national championships. I find that very, very hard to believe. So that's the question is how much will this damage Alabama? And how much will the damage help Georgia? I think that it will damage Alabama for sure. I don't know how much, but it will hurt them. But it will hurt them over time. It will not hurt them the way maybe you thought it would immediately. And you think, this thing's going to crumble. No. But over time, it will hurt. And again, I know a lot of people watching, if you're 14, you only know Nick Saban in Alabama. If you're 18, you probably only know Nick Saban in Alabama, and you're in memory time. I have time before that. And it was not pretty. It was not good. And it was a very challenging time at Alabama. And they really had a hard time. I remember Mike Shula coming to media days, his first season at Alabama. That was a train wreck. It was a complete media circus. I expect... Alabama is always a little bit of a media circus. It will be exactly like that now again, because whoever's coming in to replace this guy had better have multiple, big boy pants on for sure, because it's going to be a tough challenge. But I think we have seen the greatest coach in this sport. We don't see that a lot. You got Phil Jackson, Bill Belichick. We've seen this up close in a couple of these sports lately. Jimmy Johnson and NASCAR. Michael Jordan in basketball, Phil Jackson. Greatness should not be ridiculed or really greatness should be held to a standard, but it should also be appreciated. And what Nick has done has been amazing, and I think that that needs to be said. But as soon as you say words, they're in the past, and it's the future will probably belong to someone other than Alabama. Now, who will that future belong to? Will it belong to Georgia? Will it belong to Auburn? Will it belong to Ohio State, Michigan, the Gators, LSU, Texas? There's a lot of suitors out there. There's one positioned correctly right now. That's Georgia. The other one that pops in my head immediately is Texas. But we're just gonna have to see how the future positions itself. But Nick leaving, people really should appreciate him. They should listen, like I said a couple of days ago, they should listen to every single word he says. I don't know if we're ever going to have somebody like that in college football again.